Picture this, a 7-year-old girl with puff balls in her hair, wearing a knockoff school uniform, standing in the middle of Seoul's most expensive restaurant, pointing her tiny finger at a man whose mere presence makes grown men wet themselves. This man controls half of Seoul's underground empire. He's never heard the word no in his entire adult life. Until today. Until her. Before we dive into this absolutely wild story, do me a favor, and I promise this is the only favor I'll ask, unlike that one friend who just needs to borrow $5 every single week. Smash that like button if you've ever seen a kid say something so outrageously bold that you had to pretend you didn't hear it. Subscribe if you want more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinarily unhinged things. And drop a comment telling me, what's the boldest thing you said as a kid? Because I guarantee it wasn't to a mafia boss. Now, let's get into it. The Imperial Dragon restaurant fell silent. Not the comfortable kind of silence where people are just enjoying their overpriced food. No, this was the kind of silence that happens right before something catastrophic, like when you hear your full government name being called by your mother from 3 rooms away, or when you realize you've sent a text about someone to that someone. At the center of this silence stood 7-year-old Zuri Tor, all 3'9" of her, with her box braids pulled into 2 defiant puff balls on either side of her head, her too short uniform skirt, because she'd grown 2 inches over summer and her mom couldn't afford a new one yet, and her scuffed shoes that she'd colored black with a Sharpie just that morning. And she was pointing. Not just pointing, she was pointing with the kind of audacity that could only come from a child who hadn't yet learned that some battles you just don't pick. The object of her finger pointing? Kang Min-jun. The Kang Min-jun. The man whose name made seasoned gangsters check their rearview mirrors. The man who owned 40% of Seoul's commercial real estate and 100% of its fear. 6'3" of designer suits, slick back hair, and eyes so cold they made winter look warm. He was sitting at his usual corner table, surrounded by 6 men in identical black suits, with a view of the entire restaurant because men like Kang Min-jun never sat with their backs to doors. Did you just call my mum fat and ugly? Zuri's voice rang out in perfect Korean, though her accent carried the melodic undertones of her Nigerian heritage, making each word sound somehow more aggressive and more adorable at the same time. Every single person in the restaurant, the old-money Korean businessmen, the influencers pretending to casually eat at a place that was 1 bill away from sending them into bankruptcy, the waitstaff who'd served celebrities and CEOs without breaking a sweat, every single one of them stopped breathing. One of Min-jun's men, a boulder of a human being called Sang-ok, moved to stand. Min-jun raised 1 finger. Just 1. Sang-ok sat back down faster than a student when the teacher looks in their direction. Min-jun's eyes, dark and calculating, shifted from the wine glass he'd been examining to the small girl before him. No one had raised their voice at him in 15 years. The last person who did was still, allegedly, contributing to the foundation of a building in Gangnam. Excuse me. His voice was quiet. Dangerously quiet. The kind of quiet that made people start mentally writing their wills. My mom. Zuri took 3 steps closer, and someone in the restaurant actually gasped. You pointed at her and said something to your friends and they all laughed. I heard the word fat and I saw you make a face. So I'm asking you, did you just call my mom fat and ugly? Now, to understand the sheer audacity of this moment, you need to understand where Zuri was pointing. There, about 20 feet away, sitting at the smallest, cheapest table in the entire restaurant, the one near the kitchen door that smells like dish soap and recycled air, was Grace Tor. Zuri's mother. A woman who was indeed plus-sized, beautifully, unapologetically so, wearing her best dress, which was really her only dress nice enough for a place like this, her hair wrapped in a colorful Ankara print, looking absolutely mortified as she half stood from her chair, hands outstretched toward her daughter in universal mother language for, girl, get back here before you get us killed. Min-jun looked at Grace. Then at Zuri. Then back at Grace. The restaurant held its collective breath. And then Kang Min-jun did something he hadn't done in public in over a decade. He smiled. Not a warm smile. Not even a friendly smile. More like the smile of a cat that just noticed a mouse doing something particularly entertaining before the inevitable. "Little girl," he said, his Korean slow and deliberate, "do you know who I am?" No, Zuri lied, because she absolutely knew. Her mother had gone pale and whispered his name the moment they'd spotted him, urgently trying to make herself smaller and invisible. "But I know you're rude. And I know that nobody talks about my mom. Not at school, not at church, and definitely not," she gestured broadly at the fancy restaurant, "in whatever this place is. So you need to apologize. Now." Someone's chopsticks clattered to their plate. A waiter looked like he might faint. Sang-ok's hand moved toward his jacket. Min-jun's smile widened just a fraction. "Zuri. Zuri Tor." Grace's voice cracked through the tension as she rushed toward her daughter, her Nigerian accent thick with panic. "I am so sorry, sir, she didn't mean, please, she's just a child." But before Grace could reach her daughter, before Sang-ok could do whatever Sang-ok was planning to do, before the entire situation could explode into whatever catastrophic ending seemed inevitable, Min-jun laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A real, actual laugh. It was rusty, like machinery that hadn't been used in years, slightly concerning, definitely unexpected, and it made every single one of his men look at each other in confusion. "Sit down," Min-jun said to Grace, gesturing to the empty chair at his own table. What?" Grace froze mid-step. "Sit down." He gestured again. "You too, little warrior. Come. Sit. Let's talk about manners." To understand how a 7-year-old girl ended up shouting at Korea's most feared crime boss, we need to rewind. Not just a little bit. We need to go back 3 months, to a small, cramped apartment in Itaewon, where our story really begins. Meet Zuri Tor. Zuri Tor was not your average 7-year-old. For starters, she could speak 4 languages fluently, Igbo, from her mother, English, from international school before things got tight, Korean, from living in Seoul for 3 years, and what she called kid language, the universal tongue of playground negotiation and translation that kids somehow master without trying. She could do mathematics 3 grade levels above her age. She'd taught herself to read Korean in 6 months by watching K-dramas with subtitles and annoying every ajumma in their neighborhood with questions. She had a memory that her mother called both a blessing and a curse, blessing because Zuri never forgot anything she learned, curse because she also never forgot anything you promised her, so good luck trying to wiggle out of that, we'll see, you thought she'd forget about. But here's the thing about being a 7-year-old genius when you're poor, nobody cares. Not in the way that matters, anyway. Zuri attended a local public school in Seoul, not the fancy international school where the other African expat kids went. That school cost money that her mother, Grace, simply didn't have. Not after Zuri's father had disappeared back to Nigeria 2 years ago, leaving behind only debt, disappointment, and a daughter who had inherited his brilliant mind but, unfortunately, none of his financial sense. Grace worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. Early morning cleaning at a commercial office building, 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. Afternoon shift at a Nigerian restaurant in Itaewon, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Evening English tutoring for Korean students, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Between jobs, Grace was just tired. The kind of tired that lives in your bones. The kind of tired that makes you forget what not tired feels like. But she never missed Zuri's bedtime. Never. Even if she had to run from a tutoring session, even if she hadn't eaten dinner herself, Grace Tor tucked her daughter in every single night and asked her the same 3 questions. What did you learn today? What made you happy today? What will you dream about tonight? This is important. Remember this. Because this nightly ritual was the foundation of everything, of Zuri's confidence, her curiosity, her absolute conviction that she mattered, even when the world suggested otherwise. It was a Tuesday when everything changed. Zuri came home from school with a crumpled flyer in her backpack. She'd hidden it under her textbooks, beneath her lunchbox, wrapped inside her gym clothes, not because she didn't want her mother to see it, but because she wanted to choose the perfect moment to show it. Grace noticed immediately, of course, because mothers have a sixth sense for when their children are hiding something, even if it's something good. "Zuri, why are you smiling like that?" "Like what?" "Like you know something I don't know." "I always know things you don't know." "I know the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell." "Do you know that?" "Girl, don't play with me." Zuri pulled out the flyer with the drama of a magician revealing their final trick. Seoul International Academy. Annual Genius Scholarship Competition. Full tuition plus living stipend for elementary division winner. Open to all children ages 7 to 10 residing in Seoul. Grace read it once. Twice. 3 times. Then she looked at her daughter, and Zuri saw something flicker in her mother's eyes, hope, maybe, or fear, or that dangerous combination of both. "Baby." Grace started. "I can do it," Zuri said quickly. "Mama, I know I can. The test is in 3 months. It's math, Korean, English, and general knowledge. I'm good at all of those things. You always say I'm smart. You are smart. You're brilliant. But Zuri, this is a very competitive. I can do it." Grace looked at her daughter. Really looked at her. At those eyes that burned with determination, at those small fists clenched with certainty, at that beautiful, brilliant, bold little girl who didn't yet know how cruel the world could be to people who looked like them, who sounded like them, who existed in the margins. And Grace made a decision that would change everything. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Let's do it." If you thought Grace Tor was busy before, what happened next was insanity. She cut her hours at the restaurant, losing much-needed income, to help Zuri study. She spent money they didn't have on practice books. She called in favors from every Korean mother she tutored, asking for old test preparation materials, study guides, anything that might help. And Zuri? Zuri attacked studying like it was an Olympic sport. She woke up at 5 a.m. every morning to study before school. She studied during lunch while other kids played. She studied on the subway, in waiting rooms while her mother worked, at the laundromat while their clothes tumbled dry. Their neighbor, an elderly Korean woman named Mrs. Park, started helping too. She'd lived through the Korean War, raised 4 children on her own, and had exactly 0 patience for excuses. She drilled Zuri on Korean vocabulary with the intensity of a drill sergeant. Again. Mrs. Park would snap, hitting the table with her hand. "Songsilhem, diligence." Zuri would respond. Again. "Ini, patience." Again. "Ini, patience." Again. "Kyunji, persistence." Good. Now, why do you need these things? To win the scholarship. No. You need these things for life. The scholarship is just practice. Again. In the evenings, when Grace came home from tutoring, they'd study together at their small kitchen table, surrounded by books and papers, surviving on gimbap and determination. "Mama," Zuri asked one night, 2 months into studying, "what will you do if I win?" "When you win," Grace corrected automatically. "When I win." "When you win, baby, I'm going to sleep for 3 whole days." Grace smiled, but her eyes were serious when she continued. "And then I'm going to watch you become everything you're meant to be. Here's what no one tells you about having big dreams when you're poor: logistics." The scholarship competition was being held at Seoul International Academy, across the city. No problem, right? Take the subway. Except it was on a Saturday. The same Saturday Grace had her biggest tutoring client, a wealthy family in Gangnam who paid triple her normal rate for weekend sessions. The session that literally paid their rent. Grace tried to reschedule. The family said no, it was their son's only free day before his exams. It was this Saturday or they'd find another tutor. "I'll go alone," Zuri said. "You're 7. I'm 7.5. And I take the subway to school by myself sometimes." Sometimes is different from, Grace stopped, pinched the bridge of her nose. "No. I'll ask Mrs. Park. Maybe she can take you." Mrs. Park agreed before Grace could even finish explaining. "A win for one is a win for all," the elderly woman declared, gripping Grace's hands with surprising strength. "I'll take her myself. Make sure she gets there safely. You go earn that money, and I'll make sure our genius gets to her test." Grace could have cried from relief. But life, as it often does for people already struggling, had other plans. The evening before the test, their neighbor Mr. Cho knocked on the door, his face creased with concern. "Miss Tor. I thought you should know, Mrs. Park is very sick. High fever, terrible cold. I brought her medicine, but she can barely get out of bed." The words hit Grace like a physical blow. For a long moment, she just stood there, hands still on the doorknob, feeling her carefully constructed plan crumble like tissue paper in rain. "What do I do now?" she whispered, more to herself than anyone else, pressing her hands against her face as if she could physically hold herself together. "Mama?" Grace looked down to find Zuri watching her with those two old eyes, eyes that had seen her mother struggle and sacrifice, eyes that understood more than any 7-year-old should have to. "Mama, I can do it. I know the subway map better than most adults. I'll text you at every stop. I promise." This is what poverty does, it makes 7-year-olds learn independence faster than they should. It makes mothers have to choose between rent and being present. It makes families negotiate around gaps that shouldn't exist. Grace wanted to say no. Every maternal instinct screamed no. But they needed that tutoring money. And Zuri needed this chance. "Okay," Grace finally agreed, her voice tight. "But you follow my rules exactly." Competition day arrived dressed in spring sunshine and Zuri's best outfit, a dress that Mrs. Park had altered earlier from one of her granddaughter's old clothes, paired with shoes that were a half size too small but looked presentable. Grace walked Zuri to the subway station, checked her phone charged 3 times, made her repeat the emergency plan twice, hugged her so tight Zuri squeaked, and then watched her daughter disappear down the subway stairs. Then Grace went to Gangnam to teach Korean teenagers English grammar while her heart stayed on the subway with Zuri. Meanwhile, Zuri emerged from the subway in a neighborhood that smelled like money. Seoul International Academy looked less like a school and more like a palace. Or maybe a museum. Or maybe what happened when a palace and a museum had a baby and that baby was very, very expensive. Zuri walked through gates, crossed a courtyard with an actual fountain, not the decorative kind that just sits there, but the kind with water that moved and made peaceful sounds that probably cost someone's yearly salary in maintenance. The other kids arriving for the test looked like they'd stepped out of a K-drama about rich people problems. Designer backpacks. Clothes with tags Zuri recognized from TV commercials. Parents in luxury cars giving last-minute encouragement and handing over Lucky Charms that looked more expensive than luck should cost. And then there was Zuri. Black. Alone. Wearing a altered hand-me-down dress. With knockoff shoes colored in with Sharpie. She stuck out like, well, like exactly what she was. "Excuse me," a woman with a clipboard and a smile sharp enough to cut glass approached her. "Are you lost? The scholarship test is for registered students only." "I'm registered," Zuri said, pulling out her printed confirmation email, printed at a PC Bang because they didn't have a printer at home. Zuri tore. Test number 347. The woman's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "I see. And where are your parents?" Working. Working. The woman repeated it like it was a foreign concept. Well. Follow me. Zuri was led to a large examination hall that looked like it could host a ball in a fairy tale. About 200 kids were already seated at individual desks, each spaced precisely apart. Zuri found her assigned seat, number 347, all the way in the back corner. Of course. She sat down, arranged her pencils, the cheap kind you buy in bulk, not the fancy mechanical ones every other kid had, and waited. A proctor cleared his throat. Welcome to the Seoul International Academy Genius Scholarship Competition. You have 3 hours. Begin. The test was hard. Not hard like Zuri couldn't do it, hard like it was designed to be intimidating. Questions that twisted and turned, that required not just knowledge but strategy, that tested not just what you knew but how you thought. Zuri loved it. Her pencil flew across the pages. Math problems that unfolded like puzzles. Korean passages that revealed their meanings like secrets. English questions that played with language like toys. General knowledge questions that connected history, science, geography, and culture into a web of understanding. She finished with 45 minutes to spare. Around her, kids were still working, some chewing their pencils anxiously, others with furrowed brows of concentration. Zuri sat back, double-checked her answers, and then allowed herself a small smile. She'd done it. Whatever happened next, she'd done her absolute best. Results would be posted in 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks were the longest of Zuri's 7.5 years of life. She dreamed about the test. She second-guessed answers she'd been certain about. She mentally retook the entire exam 17 times, each time finding new things to worry about. Grace tried to keep her distracted, but she was just as anxious. Every night at bedtime. What did you learn today? What made you happy today? What will you dream about tonight? And every night, Zuri's answer to the third question was the same, winning. Mrs. Park tried tough love. Stop obsessing. You did your best. What will be, will be. But even Mrs. Park checked her phone more often than usual, just in case. On day 13, Zuri's teacher at school, a kind woman named Ms. Kim who'd been quietly rooting for her, pulled her aside. Zuri, whatever happens, I want you to know something. You're special. Not because of any test. Because of who you are. Your curiosity, your determination, your heart. No scholarship can measure that. Okay. Zuri nodded, not trusting herself to speak without crying. On day 14, Grace came home early from the restaurant with tteokbokki, Zuri's favorite, and they had a picnic on their apartment floor, pretending everything was normal, pretending they weren't both vibrating with anticipation. Mama? Zuri asked, mouth full of rice cake. If I don't win, are you going to be disappointed? Grace set down her chopsticks. Baby, look at me. Look at me. I have never been disappointed in you. Not once. Not ever. You understand? You could come in last place and I would still be the proudest mother in all of Seoul. In all of Korea. In the whole world. Because you tried. Because you're brave. Because you're you. But you spent so much money. Money comes and goes. But you. You're forever. Day 15 arrived like an unwanted guest, inevitable but not exactly welcome. Zuri woke up before her alarm, which was saying something because her alarm was set for 5 a.m. Results would be posted on the Seoul International Academy website at 9 a.m. sharp. Grace had taken the morning off, actually called in sick for the first time in 2 years, which shows you how important this was. They sat together at their small kitchen table, Grace's laptop between them, the old one that took 5 minutes to boot up and made concerning grinding noises, watching the clock. 8:47 a.m., Zuri bounced her leg so hard the table shook. 8:53 a.m., Grace made tea neither of them would drink. 8:58 a.m. Mrs. Park knocked on the door and let herself in without waiting for an answer. "I'm here. Don't argue. Where's the computer?" 9 a.m. Grace refreshed the page. "Loading. Loading. Loading. Your internet is slow like a snail with arthritis," Mrs. Park muttered. "We know," Grace and Zuri said in unison. Finally, the page loaded. Seoul International Academy Genius Scholarship Competition, results. Elementary Division, ages 7 to 10. First place winner, full scholarship award asterisk. Zuri saw her name and the world tilted sideways. Tor, Zuri Kayamika. Score, 98.7 out of 100. Exceptional performance across all categories. Highest mathematics score in competition history. For exactly 3 seconds, nobody breathed. Then Grace screamed. Actually screamed, the kind of scream that made their neighbors bang on the wall in concern or annoyance, possibly both. Mrs. Park started crying and muttering in Korean about, "Good girl," and "I knew it," and something about ancestors smiling. And Zuri? Zuri sat very still, reading her name over and over again, making sure it was real, making sure she wasn't dreaming, making sure the universe hadn't made some cosmic mistake. "Mama," she whispered. "Yes, baby. I won. You won. I won." And then all 3 of them were crying and laughing and hugging in their small kitchen that suddenly felt enormous, like it could contain all the joy in the world. Grace lifted Zuri up and spun her around, something she rarely did anymore because her back hurt from cleaning jobs and Zuri was getting bigger. But today her daughter weighed nothing at all. "My baby. My brilliant, beautiful baby. I knew you could do it. I knew it." Mrs. Park was already on her phone, calling every Korean grandmother in the building, spreading the news like it was her own granddaughter who'd won. The scholarship was complete, full tuition, books, uniforms, lunch, even a stipend for additional educational expenses. Zuri would start at Seoul International Academy in the fall semester. Everything was about to change. After the initial hysteria calmed down, about 3 hours later, Grace looked at her daughter with tears still shining in her eyes. "We need to celebrate. Properly. Something special. McDonald's?" Zuri suggested hopefully. Grace laughed. "Bigger than McDonald's. You just won the most competitive scholarship in Seoul, baby. We're going somewhere fancy." "How fancy?" "So fancy we'll have to watch YouTube videos on how to act." And that's exactly what they did. Grace had been saving money in a small envelope taped behind the refrigerator, emergency money, rainy day money, money for when things got really desperate. She counted it out, 200,000 won. About $170. More money than they'd ever spent on a single meal in their entire lives. "Mama, that's too much," Zuri started. "Hush. My daughter is a genius. Officially certified and everything. We're celebrating." Grace researched restaurants like she was planning a military operation. She read reviews, compared prices, looked at pictures. Finally, she found it, the Imperial Dragon restaurant in Gangnam. Fancy enough to feel special, expensive enough to hurt but not kill the budget, with a lunch special that made it almost reasonable. They made a reservation for Saturday lunch. Grace bought herself a new dress, well, new to her, from the second-hand market, but beautiful, in bright African print that made her feel like royalty. She wrapped her hair in matching fabric, put on lipstick she saved for job interviews, and told herself she belonged anywhere her daughter belonged. Zuri wore the same dress from the competition, freshly washed and ironed with creases so sharp they could cut paper. They took the subway to Gangnam, holding hands, watching the neighborhoods transform from working class to wealthy, from comfortable to extravagant. "You ready?" Grace asked as they climbed the stairs to exit the station. "Ready," Zuri confirmed. They were not ready. The Imperial Dragon restaurant existed in that space between nice restaurant and why is there a chandelier in the bathroom? Everything was gold or glass or both. The host's stand looked like a piece of art. Even the air smelled expensive, like if money had a scent, it would smell like this place. Grace and Zuri walked in, and every single person, the hosts, the servers, the guests, turned to look. Not subtle glances. Full-on stares. Because here's the thing, there weren't a lot of black people at the Imperial Dragon restaurant on a Saturday afternoon. Actually, there were exactly 2, and they just walked in wearing second-hand clothes and hope. The host, a young man in a suit, looked at them like they'd wandered in by accident. "Can I help you?" His English was automatic, assuming they didn't speak Korean. "Reservation for 2, Grace said in perfect Korean, her accent minimal after years of practice. Under tour. 1 p.m. The host blinked, checked his computer, blinked again. "Ah. Yes. Right this way." They were led through the restaurant, past tables of wealthy Korean families, past business people in designer suits, past influencers photographing food too pretty to eat. To a table near the kitchen door. The worst table in the restaurant. The table they give you when you have a reservation so they can't turn you away, but they also want to make it clear you're not quite the clientele they had in mind. Grace's jaw tightened, but she smiled. "Thank you." They sat down. The menus were in Korean, English, and Japanese, with prices that made Grace's stomach clench even though she'd budgeted for this. "Mama, look." Zuri pointed at the menu. "They have bibimbap. And it comes with 3 side dishes and, Mama, why does that soup cost 45,000 won? Is it made of gold?" "Probably," Grace muttered, doing mental math, calculating what they could order and still make rent. A server appeared, a different one, younger, looking uncomfortable. "Have you decided?" Grace ordered carefully, the lunch special for Zuri, a smaller dish for herself, water instead of drinks. "Very good," the server said, and disappeared quickly, like their table might be contagious. That's when Grace noticed them. In the corner, at the best table in the restaurant, surrounded by men in black suits, Kang Min-jun. She recognized him immediately because everyone in Seoul knew his face, even if they pretended not to. His picture was in the news, always in the background of important events, always carefully legal but everyone knowing the truth underneath. Grace went very still. "Zuri, don't stare at that table in the corner." Zuri, being 7, immediately looked directly at the table in the corner. Min-jun sat like a king at his table, discussing something with his men. Then he glanced up, scanning the restaurant with the casual surveillance of someone used to tracking threats. His eyes passed over their table. And stopped. He said something to one of his men, saying okay, though Grace didn't know his name. Pointed subtly in their direction. The men looked. One of them said something. They all laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh. It wasn't even meant to be heard across the restaurant. But in the particular acoustics of that space, with the high ceilings and marble floors, sound carried. And Grace heard one word clearly, tung 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 hey, fat. She closed her eyes. Took a breath. She'd heard worse. She'd survived worse. This was fine. This was. Did he just say what I think he said? Zuri asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Zuri, ignore it. Mama, did that man just call you fat? Zuri. But Zuri was already looking at Min-jun's table, her young mind connecting dots, the pointing, the laughter, the words she'd definitely learned. Korean kids at school weren't always nice, her mother's suddenly rigid posture. And I think he made an ugly face too, Zuri continued, her voice rising. Like this, she imitated an exaggerated disgusted expression. Zuri Kayamaka Tor, you stop that right now. Too late. Zuri was already standing up. Already walking across the restaurant. already pointing her small finger at the most dangerous man in Seoul. Which brings us back to where we started. Back to the confrontation. Sit down, Min-jun said again, gesturing to the empty chairs at his table. Grace's survival instincts warred with her confusion. Sitting with Kang Min-jun seemed like a terrible idea. But refusing Kang Min-jun seemed like a worse one. She reached for Zuri's hand, pulled her close, and together they approached the table of doom. Up close, Min-jun was even more intimidating. His suit probably was the kind they only saw in magazines. His watch caught the light and looked like it could fund a small country. Everything about him screamed power, money, danger. Zuri, undeterred, climbed into a chair and looked him straight in the eye. "You haven't apologized yet," she said. Sang-ok made a sound like an angry bear. Min-jun held up that single finger again. Silence. "Your daughter is very brave," Min-jun said to Grace in Korean, still smiling that concerning smile. "Or very careless. I haven't decided which." "I'm so sorry," Grace started, her accent thickening with stress. "She's just a child, she doesn't understand." "I understand perfectly," Zuri interrupted in Korean. "I understand that you were rude about my mum, and rude is rude, no matter who you are. My teacher says manners matter more than money." One of Min-jun's men, a younger one with a scar across his eyebrow, made a choking sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Min-jun's eyes flickered to him. The man immediately became very interested in his napkin. "Your teacher," Min-jun said slowly, returning his attention to Zuri, "is very wise." "What else does your teacher say?" "That we should stand up for people we love. That being scared is okay but being a coward isn't. That small people can do big things." Zuri crossed her arms. "And that everyone deserves respect. Everyone. Even people sitting at bad tables near the kitchen." This time, Min-jun's smile shifted. Became something almost genuine. "You're right," he said. The entire table, his men, Grace, even Zuri, stared at him. "I was rude," Min-jun continued. "I made a comment about your mother's appearance to my associates. It was unnecessary and unkind. I apologize." Grace's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Zuri narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "Do you mean it, or are you just saying it?" "When I speak, I mean it. When I apologize, which I haven't done in 15 years, I mean it. Your mother is beautiful, and I was rude. I apologize." He turned to Grace, and his expression shifted into something almost respectful. "Ms. Tor, I apologize for my disrespectful comment. It was beneath me." Grace, still processing the fact that she was sitting at a table with a crime boss who was apologizing to her 7-year-old daughter, managed, "Thank you." "Now," Min-jun leaned back in his chair, "since we've established that I'm rude and your daughter is fearless, let's talk. What brings you to the Imperial Dragon? This isn't," he paused delicately, "your usual type of establishment." "We're celebrating," Zuri announced proudly. "I won a scholarship to Seoul International Academy. I got the highest math score in the competition's history." For the first time, actual surprise crossed Min-jun's face. "Seoul International Academy? The Genius Scholarship? You know it?" Grace asked. "I donate to it," Min-jun said dryly. He studied Zuri with new interest. "How old are you?" 7.5. "And you competed against children up to age 10? "Yes." "And won?" "Yes." "Impressive." He gestured to one of his men. "Taewon, your daughter took that test last year, didn't she?" The man, Taewon, nodded reluctantly. "Yes, sir. She came in 7th place." "And how old was she?" 10, sir." Min-jun looked at Zuri. "You beat Taewon's daughter. He's very proud of his daughter." Very competitive about her academics. I'm sure she's very smart, Zuri said diplomatically, which made Minjun laugh again. You, he pointed at Zuri, are dangerous. Intelligence and politeness. Terrible combination. He snapped his fingers, and a server appeared instantly, not the uncomfortable young one from before, but the head server, moving faster than Grace had seen any of the staff move. Yes, Mr. Kong. These are my guests. Cancel their order from that terrible table by the kitchen. Who sat them there? Never mind, we'll discuss later. Bring them the full premium tasting menu. The one we reserve for VIP guests. With the good banchan, not the regular service. And bring dessert for the child. All of the desserts. Let her choose. But sir, the tasting menu is... Minjun's smile dropped. Am I unclear? No, sir. Right away, sir. Grace found her voice. Mr. Kong, that's too much, we can't possibly. You can and you will. Your daughter defended your honor in front of me. The least I can do is buy you lunch. Besides, his smile returned, sharper now, I wasn't lying when I said I'd donate to the scholarship fund. Consider this an investment in Seoul's future genius. What followed was the most surreal meal of Grace Tor's entire life. And Grace had once accidentally gone to a Buddhist temple ceremony thinking it was a job interview, so that's saying something. The premium tasting menu arrived course by course, each dish more elaborate than the last. Banchan covered the table, not the standard 3 or 4 side dishes, but 12 different varieties, each in their own beautiful ceramic dish. Zuri's eyes got wider with each course. Mama, is that gold? Is there actual gold on this fish? It's gold leaf, baby. It's edible. But why? Because rich people are weird, Minjun answered before Grace could, making one of his men choke on his water. Between courses, Minjun asked Zuri questions. Not the condescending questions adults usually ask children, but real questions. What's your favorite subject? Math. But not because it's easy, because it's like puzzles. Everything fits together perfectly if you find the right way. What do you want to be when you grow up? Rich enough that my mom doesn't have to work 3 jobs. Said with the blunt honesty only a 7-year-old could manage. Grace's hand tightened on her chopsticks, but Minjun just nodded. Good answer. Honesty about money is rare. Most people pretend they don't care about it while secretly caring about nothing else. What would you do with money if you had it? Zuri considered this seriously. First, I'd get my mom a car so she doesn't have to take the subway at 4 a.m. Then I'd get Mrs. Park a new TV because hers is old and the sound cuts out during her dramas and she gets really mad. Then I'd buy myself books. A lot of books. Maybe a whole library. Not toys. Not games. Books are better. Toys get boring. Books stay interesting forever. Minjun looked at Grace. You've raised her well. I've raised her honest, Grace said quietly. We don't have much, but we have that. Something shifted in Minjun's expression. Something almost sad, almost nostalgic. My mother used to say something similar. Before. He trailed off, then seemed to shake himself. Sang okay, remember when we were young? When we thought we'd be baseball players? The whole table laughed, and for a moment, these dangerous men were just men. People. With mothers and memories and dreams they'd had before life turned them into whatever they'd become. Zuri, emboldened by good food and the surreal atmosphere, asked, Mr. Kong, what do you do? For work. Every single person at the table froze. Minjun's smile became unreadable. I'm a businessman. What kind of business? The complicated kind. That's not an answer. No, he agreed, it's not. But it's the only one you're getting. He turned to Grace, his expression serious now. Mrs. Tor, your daughter will start Seoul International Academy in the fall. Yes, sir. That school is challenging. Not just academically. Socially. The students there come from wealthy families. Very wealthy. They're not always kind to people who are different. Grace's spine straightened. Zuri knows who she is. I don't doubt that. But knowing who you are and surviving a school full of rich teenagers are different things. He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket, slid it across the table. If she ever has problems, real problems, not just typical school drama, call this number. Tell them Minjun sent you. Grace stared at the card like it might explode. Why would you? Because today, a 7-year-old girl stood up to me when grown men won't. Because she defended her mother's honor without thinking about the consequences. Because Seoul needs more people like her, and fewer people like me. His smile was sharp again. And because I respect courage, even when it's foolish. Especially when it's foolish. He stood up, and immediately his men stood too, moving in synchronized coordination. Enjoy the rest of your meal. And Zuri? He looked down at her, this small girl with puff balls in her hair and determination in her eyes. Study hard. Be brilliant. But stay brave. The world has enough smart people. It needs more brave ones. He turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Grace. Ms. Tor, one more thing. Next time you want to celebrate your daughter's accomplishments, you call my restaurant manager first. No daughter of Seoul sits at a table by the kitchen. Understood? Before Grace could respond, he was gone, his men flowing around him like a dark river, leaving silence and confusion and half the restaurant openly staring at their table. Grace and Zuri sat in the aftermath, surrounded by more food than they could possibly eat, holding a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Mama? Zuri whispered. Did that really just happen? I think so, baby. Did I really yell at the boss? You really did. Are you mad? Grace looked at her daughter, her brilliant, brave, absolutely insane daughter, and started laughing. The kind of laughter that comes from relief and shock and pure maternal terror at what could have happened but didn't. Mad? Baby, I don't even know what I am. Proud? Terrified? Both? Definitely both. He apologized though. He did. And he gave us all this food. He really did. And his card, in case I have problems at school. Grace looked at the card again. No name, just a phone number and a small embossed symbol, a dragon. You will not be calling the Mafia for help with school problems, Zuri Kayamika Tor. Not even if someone's really mean. Not even then. We handle our problems ourselves. But. Ourselves, Zuri. Okay, Mama. A pause. But we can keep the card, right? Just in case. Grace sighed and tucked the card into her purse. Just in case. Zuri started at Seoul International Academy in the fall, wearing a uniform that actually fit, provided by the scholarship, carrying books that were brand new, also provided, walking through gates she'd earned her right to enter. The other students looked at her, the only black girl in her grade, one of 3 scholarship students in the entire elementary division, and made their judgments. Some were kind. Some were curious. Some were mean in that specific way that rich kids learn early, all subtle cruelty wrapped in polite language. A group of girls in her class, led by a girl named Yoonji whose father owned a tech company, decided Zuri didn't belong. Your uniform is the same as ours, but you look different in it, Yoonji said one day at lunch, her voice sweet with poison. I wonder why. Because I'm black. Zuri suggested helpfully. Yoonji's smile tightened. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The microaggressions continued for weeks. Nothing big enough to report, nothing obvious enough to point to, just a constant drip of small cruelties designed to make Zuri feel like she didn't belong. Zuri didn't tell her mother. Grace was already working so hard, already worried so much. Zuri could handle this. Except one day, it escalated. Yoonji accidentally spilled juice on Zuri's homework, a project that had taken 2 weeks. Oops, Yoonji said, not sounding sorry at all. I guess scholarship students will have to do it again. Unless you can't afford more printer ink. Something in Zuri snapped. Not violently. She didn't yell or fight or cry. She just pulled out her phone, found a number she'd secretly saved despite her mother's instructions, and sent a text. Asterisk, Hi Mr. Kong. It's Zuri. Remember me? I have a problem at school. Not a big problem. Just a mean girl problem. Do you know anyone who knows Yoon Jae-sung? He owns Taesung Solutions. That's the mean girl's dad. I don't want anything bad to happen. I just want her to stop being mean. Thank you. Zuri, asterisk. She put her phone away, went to the bathroom to wash juice off her homework, it was mostly salvageable, and forgot about it. The next day, Yoonji came to school quiet. The day after that, she apologized to Zuri. A real apology, with red-rimmed eyes that suggested she'd been crying. I'm sorry for being mean, Yoonji said, her voice small. It was wrong. I'll stop. I promise. Okay, Zuri said, because she wasn't cruel, even when she had reason to be. Thank you. Yoonji never bothered her again. Neither did anyone else. Because word spread, the way it does in schools, that Zuri Tor knew someone. Someone important. Someone you didn't want to mess with. No one knew exactly who, just that Yoonji's father had gotten a phone call, and after that phone call, he'd had a very serious conversation with his daughter about respect and kindness and the importance of treating everyone well, regardless of their background. Zuri's phone buzzed during lunch that day. An unknown number, asterisk, problem solved. MJ, asterisk. Zuri typed back, asterisk, yes. Thank you. How did you know who I meant? Asterisk. Asterisk, I know everyone who matters in Seoul. Stay brave, little warrior. MJ, asterisk. Zuri smiled and deleted the messages. When Grace asked that night, what made you happy today? Zuri thought about Yoonji's apology, about walking through school without whispers following her, about the strange protection of a dangerous man who respected courage. I made a friend, Zuri said, which was partially true. Yoonji had asked to sit with her at lunch, tentative but genuine. That's wonderful, baby. Mama? Yes. Do you think it's possible for bad people to do good things sometimes? Grace considered this, stroking Zuri's braids. I think most people aren't all bad or all good. We're complicated. We make choices. Some good, some bad. Why do you ask? Just wondering. That night, Grace's bedtime questions got their usual answers. What did you learn today? That sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, but it's okay to ask for help. What made you happy today? Making peace with someone who was mean to me. What will you dream about tonight? Being brave enough to be kind, even when it's hard. Grace kissed her forehead, turned off the light, and left Zuri to her dreams. 1 year later. Grace's phone rang early on a Saturday morning. Unknown number. Usually, she wouldn't answer, but something made her pick up. Mrs. Tor. An unfamiliar voice, professional, formal. Yes. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Kong Min-jun. He wanted me to inform you that a college fund has been established in your daughter's name. It will cover her university education, anywhere in the world she chooses to attend. The details will be sent to your email. What? Why would? Mr. Kong doesn't give reasons, ma'am. He gives gifts. Good day. Click. Grace stared at her phone, then at the email that pinged into her inbox seconds later. Official documents, legal papers, a fund with enough money to send Zuri to Harvard, Oxford, Seoul National University, anywhere she could dream of going. At the bottom of the email, a single line. Asterisk for the girl who taught me that courage comes in small packages. May she always be brave enough to be foolish. MJ asterisk. Grace sat down heavily on her couch, tears streaming down her face, happy tears, shocked tears, grateful tears, terrified tears, because what do you do when a crime boss becomes your daughter's guardian angel? Mama. Zuri emerged from her bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Why are you crying? Come here, baby. Zuri climbed into her mother's lap, getting too big for this, but never too big for this, and Grace held her tight. Zuri, do you remember that day at the Imperial Dragon? When you yelled at Mr. Kong? Yes. Zuri said cautiously. That was the bravest, most foolish, most wonderful thing you've ever done. Am I in trouble? No, baby. You're blessed. Blessed with courage I can't understand and luck I don't deserve. Grace didn't tell her about the college fund, not yet. Zuri was still 8. There was time. But she held her daughter close and thought about the strange twists of fate, about the unexpected allies you find in unexpected places, about a little girl who saw a man, not a monster, and demanded basic human decency. And somewhere across Seoul, in a penthouse apartment that overlooked the city, Kong Min-jun sat with his morning coffee and smiled. He'd built an empire on fear. But one 7-year-old girl had made him remember what it felt like to respect someone. Not for their power. Not for their money. But for their courage. For their absolute, foolish, beautiful courage. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth more than any empire. So there you have it, folks, the absolutely wild, completely true story of how Zuri Tor yelled at a mafia boss and lived to tell the tale. Actually, better than lived, she thrived. Last I heard, Zuri's now 15, top of her class at Seoul International Academy, has already been accepted to 3 different university early admission programs, and still has exactly 0 patience for disrespect. Grace opened her own tutoring center in Itaewon, serving immigrant families who need affordable education support. And Mr. Kong? Well, he's still doing whatever mysterious business he does. But rumor has it he has a soft spot for scholarship students now. Funny how that works. The moral of the story? Sometimes courage looks like stupidity until it pays off. Sometimes standing up for the people you love is worth the risk. And sometimes, just sometimes, the bad guys remember they used to be kids with baseball dreams too. If you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button faster than Zuri ran across that restaurant. Drop a like if you've ever done something brave and foolish. And comment below, what would you do if you saw someone disrespecting your mom? Until next time, stay brave, and maybe don't yell at mafia bosses unless you're absolutely sure you can pull it off.